Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually built this foundation for growth, or what I like to call transformation, a few times in my career. But speaking to most recently at Springboard, a big reason for me coming in was really thinking about how do we evolve the department and how do we transform it to be higher performing, to be more data driven.
Welcome to Season 5, Episode 2, where we focus on unblocking growth. We have dynamic Jason with us today. Jason is going to guide us through how to get your house in order to create the foundation for driving growth and innovation. There are some leaders like me, once a goal is set, we have a tendency to just sprint into action, maybe a little prematurely, creating challenges for those around us. This could lead to anxiety and then, dare I say, a little chaos in the process. Now, if you're a fan of Strength Finder and you happen to be an activator like me, you will particularly relate to what I'm saying. So let's talk about how to slow down before we start the race. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really looking forward to it.
Me too, me too. Well, Jason, when you and I've chatted and I asked you about your role and responsibilities, I thought I've heard it all, but you said something slightly different. You said, I oversee everything from marketing, brand communication, and lifestyle. I kind of want to kick off with that. What did you mean?
Yeah, so lifestyle is somewhat of a newer component into our properties, and when I say lifestyle, it's really centered around experience, right? So thinking about how do we activate and really bring the community in, make sure that we're ingrained in the communities that we're associated with, and this doesn't work for every property. There's more of those boutiques, more of those brands that are really focused on the holistic kind of guest experience and pulling that brand through on multiple levels. But really, what this role does at some of our properties is handles everything from activations to collaborations to partnerships to thinking about the mini bar that's in your room, thinking about the music that's playing, thinking about what is there to do while you're on site, and that could be everything from bringing in a DJ or bringing in some sort of uh, artistic class. We have directors of experience is what the title is that we call it. Some are doing artists in residence programs, while others are curating like a music series that they're doing with their properties. So that's under my purview as well.
Very cool. It's almost elevating the experience to next level, which is the lifestyle. Now, Jason, before we talk about how to get your house in order, let's give the listeners a little view of your role and responsibilities, kind of a little in more detail, and also give them context that the lens that you're applying for this discussion is through the hospitality industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little intro about me. So my role is head of marketing for Springboard Hospitality, and we manage, own, and operate hotels, restaurants, and bars around the country. We're predominantly manager of those spaces, but there are instances where we own as well, or own a portion. Think of like a joint venture. And those are typically in leisure types of or destination types of markets, urban, some more landscape or outdoor, if you will. But there's about 48 properties within our portfolio in 14 states. And that doesn't include the restaurants and bars that we're sort of managing and marketing as well. And so in my role, I really do have everything under the sun as marketing goes, but it's kind of a little bit wider of a breadth of a role because I'm not only just overseeing marketing, I'm overlooking brand, our communications and PR, as well as that lifestyle component. And that's sort of everything from, everything that you could probably think of, whether it's MarTech, whether it's CRM, whether it's content, like I said, public relations, social media, digital, traditional, all those types of things fall under my role. And really, the end goal being that customer acquisition and growth for the brand and properties.
And to make it super clear for the audience, we're talking about both external communications or external marketing and internal communications as well, correct?
1,000%. Yep.
And that is very unusual for some of you listening. For some, there's probably 20% who are already there. And an interesting note, you're there, when I say there, one brand, all audiences, all messages. You're there either because of a structural, innovative approach the organization took or out of necessity. There are some of you that are thrown into that position. The rest of you who are listening, in my experience, are saying that's the utopian state, not being thrown into it, but the structural piece of it. Where in
Mm-hmm.
order to create a holistic brand, you must create consistency of messaging to all the audience toward unified goals. So, Jason, before we dive into the foundation setting as a way to unblock your growth, what are some of the challenges that may be unique to your industry? Maybe they're not unique, but how do you think about some of the biggest challenges in your world today?
Yeah, so I think that I've mentioned before, and I say this often, that a big part of my job is education and communication, and I think a lot of that really boils down to I think there's kind of like 3 points there, right? Um, Marketing is ever evolving. It's an ever evolving function, and it's a lot more complex than I think a lot of people think that it is. Many think of marketing as the, pretty fluffy, sort of sexy types of things, but it's far more operational. And there's a lot of things that go into it, and there's a lot of factors that come into play when we're thinking about the decisions that we're making, how we're reporting, the story that we're trying to tell around not only to the consumer, but then, reporting back to, our key stakeholders. And I think the other piece is that it's a highly visible function. And so a lot of people often think that they're an expert, right? Especially in the social media space, especially in the advertising space, in terms of like, oh, well, that commercial's clever, or, oh, well, I follow them on social. And so I'm very, clear around, what their content is, or I might question why are they doing this or that. So I think, all of those factors sort of mixed into one together, or mixed in together, excuse me, really makes my job challenging in terms of how I properly educate and communicate on what it is that marketing is doing and the power of marketing, what it can ultimately do to drive business and drive that brand equity.
And partially the challenge is the lack of the immediate gratification from effort to result.
Mm-hmm.
And that totally makes sense. Some understand. And even if you understand, there's still a question of being data driven about the
Yeah.
understanding. How is it working? So let's go from there into, so what do we do? How do we build the foundation? And based on our discussion, it sounds like this is not a hypothetical journey. You've gone through this pretty recently. Walk us through what was the need to build the foundation? How did you approach it? And we'll go from where are you at now and beyond. But let's begin with when did it start and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually built this foundation for growth, or what I like to call transformation, a few times in my career. But speaking to most recently at Springboard, a big reason for me coming in was really thinking about how do we evolve the department and how do we transform it, to be, higher performing, to be more data driven, to be more of, that having that seat at the table as a function. In the hospitality industry, you hear a lot about revenue and sales. And I think that, historically, marketing has maybe um, been a catch-all in some cases, and in other cases, it might be that it's a nice to have, right? But marketing is truly a absolutely imperative function in order for you to drive business. And it's imperative and impactful if done right, and if focused on data, and if focused on performance and the right things. Obviously, there's different goals, there's different objectives that may be around brand, that may be around other components of the larger marketing ecosystem, but ultimately that's really where the focus is. And so it really started even before I came on board, because they were looking for this change, right? And so really, I kind of kicked off the role knowing that this was something that kind of needed to happen. And so a lot of what I had done initially was that, like, assessing, evaluating, rolling up my sleeves, and really understanding what was I working with, where were we at today as a department, where are we at as an organization, what's the reputation, where are we missing, where are we winning, what do we have activated, what do we not have activated. So really kind of diving in from that perspective. And then it was important for me to get a pulse from our key stakeholders, right? Especially knowing that reputation and what you do and building trust with your teams is a very big part of success. And so, after kind of that assessment period, I really got to the real work, which for me is first building a department vision statement that we ultimately want to strive towards. That's sort of saying, you know, here's what we want to be known for. Here's who we ultimately are. And here is what you can count on us for, right? Like, this is the type of service that we're going to offer to our clients. This is the type of a department that we're going to be. This is the type of people that we're going to hire and really go after. And so really setting the stage there. And from that, building out a roadmap. I'm a very big, like, visual person, a very big roadmap kind of strategic type of person. And so again, coming out of that assessment evaluation period, it was really starting to put together what are the building blocks to transform and evolve this department that ultimately would ladder back to that vision statement, right? So that roadmap really consisted of sort of themes or buckets that were kind of like my strategic pillars, followed by, key initiatives that would support each of those pillars, and then having really clear KPIs associated with that, so that I could measure and evaluate success along the way. I think the key to all of it, though, is less is more, right? I think it's easy to come into a situation like this or an organization and try to suddenly change the world, right? Try to change everything. And I'm guilty of that in plenty of roles, and even in this one. And I think, you really have to be mindful of, like, what type of bandwidth you're working with, and making sure that you've got the capacity on the team to make it happen. But I think you also have to be mindful of organizational change and people accepting that type of change that quickly. So I think by having some really key buckets, followed by no more than 4 to 5 initiatives supporting those, it helps you really hone in and focus on what's the most important, what's the most impactful.
Just a couple observations there. One is you use the word transformation. And, I just think about the conversations I'm having in the market. It appears like change, right, doesn't go far enough. to describe what either we're going through or we need to go through. It
Right.
truly is now transformational. And it's really cool that you came into that saying, well, if it is going to be transformational, we need to be very clear where we're going, right? And how are we going to get that, starting with the
Right.
vision. And when I think about transformation, I think about people, process, technology. These are the building blocks of how you transform. And you began to talk about the people, but I wonder, Jason, were there challenges? Were there concerns when you rolled out the vision, whether from your team or outside of your team? Because in my experience, transformative change is exceptionally difficult, and there's a percentage of the organization or team members that may follow a different path to get on board. So my curiosity is, were there headwinds, if you will, once you begin to bring stakeholders along with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to a point really quick before I answer that question. I like the word transformation, and the reason that I think that's important to call out is that, it's not to say that anything was necessarily, well, sure, there were challenges and opportunities walking into the role. It's not to say that the work that was done prior to my arrival wasn't good work or you know, um, wasn't necessary. Things were done for where we were at the time, and things were done for what was kind of needed to get the job done in that moment in time. But I think what's great about that word and thinking about this in theory is that you're taking what you're working with currently and building upon it and making it better. And so there may be elements of it that were working. Maybe there were agencies or partners that were really strong that you want to continue on. But then there's other pieces like deployment or, strategy or SOPs that you want to transform or sort of evolve. And so I wanted to kind of call that
Sure.
out initially because I think that's really, really important when we're thinking about
Hmm.
coming into an organization and really making that kind of impact. To answer your question on headwinds, certainly, right? Because I came in guns a-blazing, right? And sort of back to my point earlier, being mindful of like how much organizational change. I knew there was a lot that needed to happen quickly. Um, in order to not only support the existing growth that had happened prior to my arrival, along with what was happening while I was new in the role, but what I knew was about to come. So, in certain cases, I needed to act quickly and make big changes. And I think what I found along the way, is that a lot of it was well received. I think a lot of it. Um, I think there were certain components where maybe it was a little bit harder for people to digest. Um, and some of that was moving too quickly and not communicating things properly in a way that people really digested and understood. So, I that's created a little bit of rework for me that I've had to go back and sort of, have conversations of re-educating or rethinking how I'm communicating something. Um, so I think that's certainly a challenge. But the biggest thing that I found is really bring people along with you. And that's a lot of what I've done with my team. So it's not just about me, right? Like they're bought into the vision, and that started as far back as when I started recruiting a lot of folks and going through that hiring process, really selling them on the vision so that when they're out, talking with others in the field, they're bought into it and they're passionate about what's happening as well.
Makes sense, Jason. And what would be some of the practices, like you said, that would needed to be some rework? And there's also probably a different path to bring existing team members along with you on the vision versus new team members because they're jumping on the vision as it's presented to them. So what would be some of the practices or approaches that you took that audience members could learn from? One of the things that I always remind myself is individuals need to hear a message X number of times, 4, 6, 8, 10 times before they hear it for the first time. And I'm included, and I often forget that. And I'm like, hey, so let's go. They're like, what do you mean? Well, I said this 3 weeks ago, right? Isn't it pretty clear? No, Adam, it's not clear because you've said so many other things that if you really want us to go there, why don't we confirm that you're still there today and be consistent? So, Jason, what are some of the techniques and approaches that audience members could learn from?
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think, repetition is key. And so whether that is through, multiple email touch points, I really try to make sure that, any chance I get to speak in front of, the larger team, whether it's our senior leadership team or it's with the field, that I'm reinforcing a lot of what we're doing. So, finding those moments, whether I've hosted a marketing town hall or multiple town halls in the past. So that's a way. We have um, our annual conference as a company, and so again, repeating a lot of those messages there, making sure that I'm when I'm emailing and sending out communication that it's I try to remove the technical, right? I try to make it as digestible and easy to read as possible so that a non-marketer or somebody who maybe has no idea about what I'm talking about could maybe relate it back to something that they do understand. And knowing in the hospitality industry, a lot of folks are operations or F&B. I try to kind of keep that in mind and sort of think about it and communicate it in their terms and sort of in a way that they would get it. So those are just some of the ways that I do it. And then I think from like new team members, I'm a huge proponent. Onboarding is extremely important to me, and I think that that is a extremely crucial part of someone's success in a company is how is what their onboarding looks like. And so I make sure that any new team member on my team, I'm a part of their onboarding process. They have multiple touch points with me where I talk about the company, I talk about the department, I talk about the roadmap, the vision, all of those types of things. Their onboarding process is a minimum of 3 weeks. That's going in depth with touch points and going over resources and tools and all those types of things. But I think that that is a really crucial component so that they've heard a little bit about it in the recruitment process or the hiring process, but then it's being reinforced again in the onboarding process.
Wonderful. And almost I'm tempted to go into onboarding details, but I'll pause just to stay the course. So when we think about, building the foundation for growth, and you've done it. You've done the vision, you've got the team members on board. How do you now kind of create the traction toward a high performing team, ensure the dynamics and this foundation is working for you to reach the goals?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think that, we've covered a little bit of that. I think buy-in is absolutely key, making sure that they're bought into the vision, they understand the vision, because they're the ones that are ultimately kind of executing on that. I I do my best to make sure that they're always a part of the process. And what I mean by that is, that they're helping to make decisions, right? So there's been lots of times in my career where I've been set on a certain path or a certain direction. I brought it to my team, and they've completely changed my mind. And I think that's the power of you know bring in people that have diverse expertise from different backgrounds, and you're all going to have a different point of view. And together, you're going to come up with the right solution, or the best solution that you think that there is possible. And ultimately, I think for them that speaks volumes, because they truly feel involved, they feel heard, they feel encouraged and empowered, to kind of speak up. And so that's really important to me. And then I would say, the other part of that, empowerment of high performing teams is, um, leading with empathy ultimately is what I like to put forth in my leadership style. Putting myself in their shoes, being real with them, being open and honest, transparent, being kind, and just being a human. Like, we're all going through things outside of work, and so I think it's really important for us to be mindful that there's more to life, right? And if you're going to have a high performer at work, you've got to be cognizant of what folks have going on in their personal lives.
Yeah, I think there are leaders, and there are times where I'm one of them, many times where I'm just so focused on getting it done that I don't take the minute to pause, to reflect, to just meet them where they are. And Jason, it's such a simple, powerful, common sense is not always common action kind of a what do I call it? A habit. I think that's a habit
Right.
to be built. Jason, people, process, technology, right, for the transformation. So we spoke about the people. You highlighted the process where you're setting the vision, you're creating the pillars and data points to ensure you're moving in that direction, and you're constantly checking in on it. In terms of technology, do you wonder if this is an important piece of the transformation you've been a part of, or that is call it a supplemental, not as critical, but I'd love for us to just check in. How important is the technology piece in this transformation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I would say that it's a little bit supplemental, but it's a bit of a hybrid, right? Because it could be crucial and critical. And why I start with supplemental is that I think it's important for you to understand what you're working with and where you need to go before you even layer in that technology. And so a lot of what, part of that assessing and evaluating for me was understanding, okay, what are the solutions that we have in place today? What does our MarTech stack look like? And what I found is that we were working with a lot of different types of systems and platforms and even partners, that had quite a bit of overlap. And so ultimately, what you lose there is you lose efficiencies. You lose time in the sense of having to go in, multiple systems and learn multiple systems. But you also lose scale, right? When you're thinking about pricing and negotiation and terms and some of that leverage that you might have. And so part of that process was, again, first understanding, all right, where are our gaps and opportunities? Okay, we've done that. Now, can anything that we're doing today solve for those from a technology perspective? And of those technologies, um, how many are truly overlapping, and where can we consolidate? Where can we start to get to, a place that maybe we have a primary and a secondary, and we move away from kind of everything else.
Yeah, you're not leading with technology, it's an enabler. Let's understand it first,
Yeah.
and then how can it support it? Um, Although I feel like I've got many, many, many more questions, Jason, but there's one more that I'd really like for us to reflect on, um, which is when you want to create this foundation, when you want to take a minute, you want to pause to have this right foundation for growth. And there are executives who are not on board, who are saying, no, 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 let's go. Here's our goals. We have everything we need. And in the audience, there are some who are listening saying, listen, I wish I could do that, Jason, what you did, but I don't know how to make the argument for it. Is it that they're not lucky to be an organization that recognizes it, where you said you were coming in to lead this change and maybe their organizations are not ready, do they have an opportunity to be that catalyst, whether it be the shock to the system, and explain why? How would you think about what advice we could give them as they embark on creating the space to build the foundation for growth?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that everyone is a catalyst for change, no matter the size of the organization. But it does take that initiative, and it does take that, thoughtful sort of strategic implementation. And so, no organization is perfect. Every organization has, opportunities or gaps as it is. And so, my advice would ultimately be, whether you're starting as big as maybe I did coming into this role or something small, put your case together, right? Make sure you have a plan. Really think through. Really do your homework and your research so that you have a really strong, solid point of view. So that whatever it is that you want to implement, you have a strong understanding of what the impact is and the why, so that you can ultimately build out that case. I think if you go into something with intention, with data, and with conviction, you're going to be heard, right? It might not always turn out the exact way that you want it to be. Maybe it won't be on the same scale that you wanted. But I guarantee you, at least a portion of it is going to be heard.
Plan, data, conviction. So for those listening, this is your, argument for getting your house in order before you continue to sprint. And Jason, this was something that I really needed to hear today, this week, this month, based on my world. So I just appreciate you taking the time. And if you all listening have a question for Jason, go ahead and throw it in the comments in the YouTube video, or if we're in contact with me, just reach out. Jason has been great to support this process, and he's open to supporting you all. So Jason, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been a
Over
lot of
now.
fun.
Bye.